Black woman fixes a rich man's car, his world shatters. When he notices her ring on. A lonely desert highway, a luxury car sat broken down, its polished silver frame shimmering in the fading light. The wealthy man who owned it, dressed in a tailored suit, looked helpless as dust swirled around him. Out of nowhere, a young black woman pulled over, rolled up her sleeves, and leaned under his hood. She wasn't a mechanic by trade, but she knew her way around engines. He watched, stunned, as she brought his car back to life. Yet when his eyes fell on her hand, on the simple but unmistakable ring she wore, his world spun out of control. The truth hidden in that ring would unravel everything he thought he knew about himself and his family. The desert stretched endlessly, a horizon of burnt orange mountains and long, empty roads. Few cars ever passed this way, and for the man stranded on the side of the highway, it felt like a cruel trick of fate. His name was Charles Whitmore, heir to a massive real estate empire, a man who had grown up in private schools, exclusive clubs, and the kind of circles where money was considered a language of power. He was used to solving problems with a phone call, a signature, or the weight of his name. But here, on this road, none of that mattered. Sweat dripped down his brow as he stared at the smoking engine of his imported car. For the first time in years, Charles felt small, powerless. That's when she appeared. A pickup truck pulled to the side, and out stepped a woman in worn jeans, a plaid shirt, and sturdy boots. Her name was Maya. She wasn't glamorous by society's definition, but her confidence radiated stronger than any diamond necklace. She walked straight toward the stranded millionaire, barely acknowledging his expensive suit, and went straight to the engine. Charles wanted to protest, wanted to tell her he could handle it, but the truth was, he couldn't. Within minutes, Maya was elbows deep in his car, diagnosing problems with a sharpness that left him silent. Charles thought she was just another Good Samaritan. But when the setting sun caught the ring on her finger, its plain band glinting in the desert light, something inside him cracked. That ring, he had seen it before, and he knew exactly what it meant. The desert wind howled, carrying grains of dust that stung Charles's face, but he barely felt them. His eyes were locked on that ring, an ordinary gold band, simple, unpolished, but one that carried weight far beyond its appearance. For years, Charles had seen that same design in his father's belongings, tucked away in a drawer like a ghost of a past never spoken about. His father, Richard Whitmore, was a powerful man, known for his ruthless business strategies and his ability to command respect in any room. But Richard was also a man of secrets, a man who had drawn thick lines between his world and the world he didn't want to acknowledge. That ring represented a truth Charles had always suspected, but never dared confirm. His father had another life, another family, one he had hidden carefully away from the polished halls of privilege. And now, standing before him, fixing his car in the middle of nowhere, was the living proof of that hidden truth. Maya's movements were steady, precise. Her hands, though worn from labor, were skilled. She spoke only to explain the problem with the car, her voice calm and steady. Yet every word she spoke seemed to echo in Charles's mind, against the backdrop of his father's stern lectures about heritage, legacy, and purity of bloodlines. He thought back to childhood dinners where his father spoke in hushed tones about the importance of image. He remembered the way his father dismissed conversations about equality, laughing them off as distractions for people who didn't understand the game of life. Now, the hypocrisy of it all burned. Charles realized that Maya wasn't just some kind stranger. She was connected to him, bound by the very bloodline his father had tried to erase. That ring, passed down like a torch, was the key. But there was more. Charles began to notice the way Maya carried herself, not with bitterness, but with resilience. She had the same sharp jawline, the same spark in her eyes that he had seen in his father. She didn't know it yet, but she was family. As the minutes stretched into an eternity, Charles felt his world split in two. Everything he had believed about his family's greatness, their supposed superiority, was unraveling. The truth wasn't just inconvenient, it was devastating. because Maya wasn't just fixing his car. She was repairing the lies his father had built an empire on. The engine roared back to life, but Charles barely noticed. His heart was pounding louder than the motor, his thoughts tangled in a storm of disbelief and betrayal. Maya wiped the sweat from her brow, unaware of the hurricane she had just unleashed in Charles's mind. She glanced at him briefly, a polite nod before stepping back from the car. It was then that the desert silence seemed to scream. The truth hung heavy in the air. Charles's father, Richard Whitmore, the titan of wealth and power, had spent decades hiding his connection to a black woman and her child. And here she was, grown, capable, resilient, wearing the ring that symbolized a bond his father had tried to bury. Charles felt his stomach churn. He thought of the boardrooms, the family estates, the speeches his father gave about upholding the Whitmore name. He thought of how many times his father had belittled others, using race as a weapon to maintain his superiority, and yet, all along, his father's bloodline was intertwined with the very people he had worked to silence. The hypocrisy was staggering. The empire his family had built was not just stained, it was cracked at its very foundation. And Charles, standing in the middle of that desert, realized he had inherited more than wealth. He had inherited a legacy of lies. Maya, oblivious to the storm raging in his mind, simply thanked him for his patience, tightened the last bolt, and prepared to leave. But Charles couldn't move. Couldn't speak. His world had been shattered by a single ring, a symbol that proved his father's story was not the truth, but a carefully crafted lie to protect power, privilege, and pride. The desert sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the road. Charles watched as Maya climbed back into her truck, her tail lights glowing red as she drove away. She didn't know the storm she had awakened, didn't realize the history she carried on her finger. But Charles knew. In that moment, he faced a choice. He could bury the truth as his father had, maintaining the illusion of power built on lies. Or he could confront it, acknowledge it, and begin to dismantle the legacy of racism and secrecy that had shaped his family. The car purred beside him, fixed by the hands of a woman his father had ignored, dismissed, perhaps even loved in silence. Her resilience was undeniable, her strength unshakable. And Charles, for the first time in his life, understood what it meant to be humbled, not by wealth, but by truth. As he drove away, the question echoed in his mind. How many empires, how many dynasties had been built on silencing voices like Maya's? How many stories, like his father's, had erased the humanity of those they feared to acknowledge? The road stretched endlessly ahead, but Charles knew his journey had just begun. The ring had shattered the illusion, and now the only way forward was through truth, because in the end, it wasn't the car that had broken down that day. It was the lie, and sometimes it takes a stranger's hands to fix what was broken all along.